What is going on YouTube? Fascinating graveyard. And today we are at the Will Rogers Museum here in Claremore, Oklahoma. We're going to talk briefly about the life of Will Rogers. I'm going to tell you exactly who he was, and we're going to visit his final resting place. Now, Will Rogers was born November 4th, 1879 in the Cherokee territories of which is now Oklahoma. Back then, Oklahoma wasn't a state. Now, I knew the name Will Rogers forever. I knew he was some kind of a cowboy, but I didn't know nothing about him. So, when Will Rogers was a little kid, there was only one thing in life that he wanted to be, and that was a cowboy. His father, Clement, was a Cherokee judge and an attorney. His mother, Mary, was a stay-at-home, took care of the kids and what have you. And one thing that Will loved to do is he loved to play with his rope, like play with the lasso. And there was a man that worked for the family that lived on the ranch that taught little Will how to lasso things, how to do tricks with the rope. And he just loved playing with the lasso, with the rope. He loved just anything having to do with horses, being a cowboy, and that's all he wanted to do in his life. Against his father's wishes, which, he wanted Will to like take over the ranch and just kind of live that kind of life. But no, Will wanted to travel around the world, and he wanted to just be a cowboy. And as Will grew older, he became really proficient with that rope. He was probably the best trick ropester for a time in the world. So when he was about 19, 20 years old, him and a friend went down to Argentina to become gauchos, basically Argentina's answer for America's cowboy. So they went down there. They wanted to be ranch owners and do the cowboy thing. However, things didn't go according to plan, and I guess they were broke, had no money, and they both went separate ways. Will set out to go over to South Africa, and over there he got a job as a ranch hand. And later on, for some reason or another, or I don't know how he found this job, but he ends up linking with a traveling carnival that was from America that happened to be overseas at the time. And he got hired on as a performer where he would just do tricks with his rope and he would tell jokes. Will Rogers was very quick-witted. So after that, the carnival went over to Australia, did more traveling, and he did that for a few years until he came back to the United States. He ends up getting a job in New York, where he became very, very famous in New York during this. I'm going to guess it might have been a publicity stunt. Some bull got let loose at Madison Square Garden during some kind of a performance, and Will lassoed it in. And he made the front page of the New York Times over his heroic deeds. So somebody seen him in the newspaper and decided to offer him a job at some kind of performance venue that was on a rooftop of a building. He was making about $140 a week, over $1,500 in today's money, or actually maybe $2,000 with today's money. So he's making a pretty good living being a single guy over in New York City. And he did that for a while until he got hired on as a performer in Vaudeville. Vaudeville was a very, very popular, basically it was a, Vaudeville was, they would just have different acts. Like one act would come up on stage, there'd be a singer. The next act would be a comedian. The next act would be a mime or whatever. And back in those days when there were no TVs in anybody's houses, people would go out for live entertainment. And he would just do tricks with his rope while doing stand-up comedy. The best I can describe Will Rogers to anybody out there today is imagine if Jay Leno was really, really good with a rope, because that's basically how I kind of see who Will Rogers was, that kind of personality and that kind of popularity where people just loved him. And, even though he would, talk about politics, at that time, it wasn't a very divisive time where, people are going to cancel you for your opinion. He made everybody laugh. Even presidents would laugh at his stand-up jokes about them and their policies or what have you. So later on, Hollywood found Will, and he became an actor. He starred in over 50 silent movies, silent pictures. But people didn't really get his humor because it's hard to convey a humor when you're so quick-witted and they can't hear you. But his popularity really became even more so when the invention of sound into movies took place. And in 1929, his first talkie, which is what they called movies with sound in those days. I think the movie was called They Should Have Gone to Paris, something like that. So altogether, Will Rogers did over 70 movies, 50 silent movies and 21 talkies. And along with those, he also had a newspaper column where on any given week, his newspaper column would reach about 40 million readers. This guy was one of the top 10 most famous people in the country at that time, and probably, in the world as well. And also, along with the movie pictures and the newspaper column, he also had a radio program. And one thing about Will Rogers that he loved in his life, other than just cowboy stuff, was he was a big proponent of Americans traveling overseas. He was a big proponent of flight, of traveling via airplane. And, I guess you could say he was like the ambassador. He was America's ambassador to air travel. And he always encouraged people, if they could, to take a trip, just go overseas, fly on an airplane. It's amazing. You can be in one place and then you could be across the country in 6 hours. Quite an amazing thing. And so you had this guy, very, very famous guy, had his hand in many, many different hats. Back when there was no social media. Now, Will's love of flight would also be the cause of his demise, sadly. So in August of 1935, Will had linked up with a man named Wiley Post. Post was the first man to travel around the world solo via an airplane. And at the time, Wiley was building this plane. He was putting some kind of fuselages on it to make it a seaplane out of discontinued. He made it out of a fuselage of a discontinued plane that he had. He was looking for some kind of flight paths between Alaska and Russia/Siberia. And Will wanted to tag along with Wiley because he was looking for content for his newspaper column. You got to constantly keep writing new articles and talking about new things. So Wiley and Will, they both set off. They took off out of, I believe, Lake Washington, up in Renton, Washington. I think of like the second week of August. And, everything was going according to plan. They would, land and take off from the water. And in Point Barrow, Alaska, they were in a some kind of a, I don't know if it was an island or whatever. And according to the eyewitnesses that were there at the time, I believe they were Eskimos, they were asking for directions, and they got a little bit disoriented because on that day the weather was not very good. And they said that when their plane took off out of the water, that it sputtered, the engine sputtered, and it nosedived and crashed into the water. Both men were killed instantly. I believe that is a picture of the wreckage right there, and then that would be, sadly, the remains of both men right there. That's pictures of the post right there. So right there, that post talks about his eye. He lost his eye working on a oil rig. But kind of post, he had that eye patch thing, kind of like Nick Fury. So he was quite well known himself, and that was kind of his signature thing. So there's a post. You know who he kind of reminds me of now that I'm thinking about it? Charles Bronson, sort of. He kind of has that Charles Bronson look. Kind of, sort of. Kind of. This typewriter right here, this was on the plane. This was what Will was using to write his columns as he was flying around Alaska. And that was the actual typewriter that was in the wreckage. I believe these were the people that witnessed the plane crash. Yes, I believe they are Eskimos. And that's some old stock footage of the plane crash right there. There's some newspapers about the crash. This was the biggest news of the week of August 1935, easily. This was very, very tragic for the country. I wanted to show you some stuff right over here. There's some items in this case, and if you can see right there, those pocket watches and the eyeglass and the pocket knife and the little puzzle book right there, those were the items that were actually in Will Rogers' pockets when he died. Wow.
Says President Roosevelt, the nation will hold him in everlasting remembrance. A close friend of Will says sadly, today a smile has disappeared from the lips of America.
Very, very sad. Okay, guys, we are going to go outside, because outside is where Will Rogers and some of his family members are buried. And as we are looking out over the valley here in Claremore, Oklahoma, we are walking up to the final resting place of Will Rogers and some of his family members. Buried alongside with Will is his wife, Betty, and some of their kids, not all of the kids, but some of the kids are buried along with them. His son, Jimmy, daughter, Mary, his son's wife, Anastasia, and they had a kid, Kim, and one of his children, Freddie Rogers, he's buried here too. He died of diphtheria when he was only 2 years old. And if you've ever heard the term, I never met a man I didn't like, that was Will Rogers' famous quote. Me, however, I usually meet people and I don't like them. Especially when they're calling the police on me at Walmart. So here it is. Now they are buried below this right here. It's an underground mausoleum. And right here it says, Aluga, Oklahoma, November 4th, 1879. Port Barrow, Alaska, August 15th, 1935. He was 55 years old when he tragically died in that airplane crash. And yeah, I think they open up. Let's get a closer look of that statue. The lady said that they open up the crypt 2 times a year. I don't know if that's just to like let people like look inside, or they open it up to, I don't know, do whatever repairs. But that is a statue of him on a horse. And yeah, I'm gonna say that might be the crypt right there. I'm not really sure. I'm looking for something that has a door. Ah, yes. This would be it. So you go down, yeah, so you would go downstairs And you can't see anything here. Yeah, you would go through that door right there. Let me see if I can get the camera through the... Yeah, you would go through that door right there, and he would be in there resting with his family. And of course, you see that vent right there. That's the vent to like let the air kind of do its process. All right, if I were, if I weren't so large right now, Lamont at large is really large right now. If I weren't so large right now, I might be able to fit through this thing if I were a beanpole. Anyways, I'm not trying to give myself any thoughts, but I will say this: if somebody wanted to come here at 2 o'clock in the morning and do something stupid, they probably could. I mean, this place is not locked up. You could just walk over here at night. So, yeah. Anyways, all right, guys. That was a quick history of Will Rogers. I hope you enjoyed the information. And I am out of here. I got to hit the road. I got to sit down somewhere and put this video together to upload it on YouTube so I could be famous. All right, guys. Rest in peace to the Rogers family. I'll catch up with you on the next vlog. Peace out.